everyone. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. So, if you're watching on YouTube, if you could please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can always follow us there. Every like and share and subscribe can help our channel to be seen by many more Stargate fans. So, we really appreciate it. And then we also have all of our socials listed up on the screen right now if you wish to follow us there. Okay, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Bye. And to all the Stargate fans out there, we would love to hear from you and chat with you on our show. So if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to us via any of our social media platforms or email.
I thought today it would be kind of cool to talk about the topic of uncanoning, because I saw this I think it was both on Facebook and Reddit. I saw this thread of what would you uncanon in Stargate if you could, and people were talking about things they kind of wish they could remove from the series, and I thought it would be kind of interesting to explore some of our own, so we can talk about that today. Of course, before we get into it, for anybody that's watching, we really want to feature some creative projects and artwork or anything that you have made or is special to you as a Stargate fan. So definitely write us, contact us, hit us up on our socials if you have something you want to share. But going forward with the episode, I just thought I would share, in case there's people unfamiliar with the term retcon, which is something that's often done in, especially in science fiction or fantasy shows, because there's so many options for this, is basically to revise an aspect of a fictional work retrospectively, typically by introducing a piece of new information that imposes a different interpretation on previously described events. So a lot of times, like for example, you could have something in a series where it's described later as, oh, it was just a dream. And this is kind of one way of, a lot of times something will happen in a show or in a movie or in a universe, and either because the fans don't like it or the writers decide they don't want that, they can kind of use that as a way to uncanon. So by making it, oh, this was a dream, or this happened in an alternate reality, or something goes and changes the timeline so it doesn't exist. And of course, in Stargate, they have so many options for that. But we both came up with 5 things that if we could, we would like to uncanon or retcon in Stargate, with a limitation of SG1 and Atlantis, because we are not at universe yet. So maybe you want to start by sharing your first one.
Okay. Yeah, so hopefully I've done this right and I understand what we were doing. But so one of the first ones I was thinking of was that I was thinking it could be cool if Dr. Weir would have stayed alive and continued to lead Atlantis. It's no shade being thrown at anyone else that then plays that kind of leading role like afterwards and leads Atlantis, but it's just, I really loved her character, and I just felt like there was so much they could have actually done with that whole thing, that it could have been switched around, that then she still was there and still led Atlantis, but there could have been a whole like crazy like dramatic thing that happened like with the replicators and all this stuff. But like, maybe even like have it that initially like they don't realize or something, and she's leading, and I don't know, crazy replicator things happen, I don't know. But like, I just feel like there could have been a ton of stuff done with her storyline that could have still kept her there. And so I really missed her once she was gone. And so I still feel like, even though I've kind of, right now, what are we on, the last season 5, even though I've warmed up to, initially like Samantha Carter being there, and then Woolsey, like it's still not the same without Dr. Weir. So I would have, that was one thing that like I thought of, was that if she didn't actually die and stayed there. So yeah.
That's a really good one. And I actually, I mean, I agree with you for many reasons. One, I agree that there's absolutely nothing wrong with Carter or Woolsey in charge. It's more of that it's unfortunate that that character is gone. And I also
Yeah.
think the way the character came to an end was also a little bit dissatisfying in that sense. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of those things where, considering what happened to Weir, Like, it wouldn't have been that difficult to either reverse it or fix it or incorporate her in a different way, or yeah, to just completely solve this. I mean, they've solved more difficult things. And so to me, it was, I think, the dissatisfaction of the ending of that arc, of her story, of her arc, was a little bit, I wish it also wasn't canon.
Yeah, yeah.
It would be really cool to see more Weir. I mean, even if Weir wasn't in charge of it, even if they did do something where they had somebody else in charge of Atlantis, or they had two people in charge of Atlantis, or Carter still came, I think that could have been possible, that Carter was still involved in some capacity, maybe in something more of a lead, like maybe she was in charge of the science team. I actually really liked Carter on Atlantis, but I do miss the presence of Weir because I thought she had such a unique relationship and presence within the Stargate universe, being that she was
Yeah.
brought in and then wasn't quite military, but then had to be put in all these situations. It gave this very certain aspect that I really enjoyed. So I agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
a,
what is your first one?
let's see. The first one I wrote down is I wish that I could uncanon that Teal'c aged during the unending episode. Like,
Ooh.
I know that Jaffa have a longer lifespan. And I know, like, I mean, it's a little bit strange because I think in the beginning they said, Braytak was so much older than him and he was like 140 or something. And I know in the end, like when they're talking about Teal'c, they kind of imply that he has several hundreds of years. But it still kind of it still kind of bothers me that he just like lost 50 years, if you really think about it. And like that's one of my things. Like I've always been really paranoid about, like, you, like something happens to you and like you wake up and it's like years later or something. And I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
poor Teal'c, like it's a lot of time just gone. And even if he lives to be 500, it's still a tenth of his life. It's like us losing like 9 or 10 years. So
Yeah.
to me, that
Yeah. No, that's a good one. Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. I felt weird about that too when that happened. Like I don't like that feeling of feeling like you've lost time that you could have had, like that just seems sad. And so, yeah, I did not think of that one. I wouldn't have thought of that one, but that's a good one. Yeah.
I mean, there has to have been like another way that they could have done it. I mean, I know the reason that they kept Teal'c like that, I mean, in a way, is for the last like little bit at the end when he was the one that knew about Daniel and Vala and the others didn't. But I
Hmm.
mean, it's still like it always later you see him and he has this like gray streak, and I always feel so bad. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of wish it didn't happen.
Yeah. 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 If you think about it, does that gray streak really make sense for that to be there? Because
No,
it's like, if you think with like Braytac and stuff, like, I can't remember what was Braytac's hair gray? I can't remember.
I think it
Um,
was almost or mostly gray, yeah.
yeah. Like it just doesn't, I mean, it makes sense to so that that that's the version of Teal'c that is
Yeah.
older. That makes total sense. And so it's kind of funny for him to have his little skunk stripe.
I mean,
But otherwise it doesn't really make sense for it to be there, really. I don't know.
no, because if you think about it, it's not really, I mean, how old was he really in terms of his life? I mean, I guess it's kind of unclear, but it almost makes it seem like he jumped from like prior to like middle age within that 50 years. And yeah, I don't know how old was Teal'c, like in say human years. I mean, with the rest of them kind of being in spanning between 30s and 40s in the show, and the time it ranged maybe by the end of the show getting to late 40s or something. I would have assumed Teal'c was kind of around the same given his status and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Okay, should I say my second one?
Yes.
So I put that I wished that Jonas Quinn would have stayed a member of SG1, but alongside Daniel Jackson.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you there.
Um, like I think that would have been, and I know we've kind of already talked about that, like in other times when we've talked about Jonas Quinn, but I think it would have been cool. Like I know like we've kind of talked before how it'd be cool to have him stay there in some capacity, but I think it would be actually really cool if he actually just stayed in SG1.
Hmm.
Similar to how like Vala was there, right? Like I think would have been really cool to just have him stay in SG1 and then have Daniel come back and have it just be a bigger team.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, he could have, I think that would have been really cool. And also it would have, I mean, I didn't like I appreciated that there was some that they went back later and revisited his planet, like in the end. But it was kind of when you think about it, like if you actually think about the arc of when he started and how like he was basically a refugee, it's very interesting that by the only end of one season he was able to go back and that everything had changed by then. And I think,
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, like Teal'c for years, he was never, he's, I mean, he's still, I guess at some point later in the show, there are some, you know, more free Jaffa, and so there's more of a community. But I mean, even in the very later seasons, there's definitely some Jaffa that are still loyal to the Goa'uld and that are not on Teal'c's side. And I think given how Jonas's planet is and how they were fighting with each other and so like stubborn about everything to begin with, it really surprises me that he would have even be like, it almost like it's just too easy that he would have been able to go back. Like if anything,
Yeah.
it almost would have done his character, like the whole storyline and everything, more justice if something else happened, like he was killed or he was like, you know, taken somewhere, and then if he came back it was like you found him. Like something else seemed like to make more sense because they're so stubborn about everything else, but like Jonas is suddenly okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think his character would have actually fit in really nicely with Daniel Jackson being back. Like I could see the two of them being like really close friends and stuff, and there could be like really funny moments there or whatever, like I think it could. I think the while his character was kind of there to fill in for the lack of Daniel Jackson, I felt like they were different enough for it to actually like mesh well together. That it would have been, I think, cool to have them stay and then like have those storylines expand. But yeah. So anywho, what's your second one?
My second one, so this is a little bit of a cheat because Martin brought it up to me when we were kind of talking about this the other day when I thought of this as a topic, but I agree with it so much. And that's Colonel O'Neill having all those like weird relationship flings with like random people in the first season, because I feel like it's just so out of character for him, for the character of O'Neill. And it's almost like they were trying to make him like, you know, a typical like Captain Kirk or something where you have a princess on every planet. And somehow that just does not suit the character as the character grows over time. And so it just, whenever I rewatch like season one, I'm always like, oh yeah, that's right. Like O'Neill was with that girl, and then there was this thing with the, and it always feels so weird to me. Like it doesn't, for I find it somehow more like fitting when like Daniel has those situations. Or like Sam, like it seems like, you know, it seems like Teal'c is married for the longest time, and then he has a couple of people that he is with later on. But then Carter seems to have the most people that they're just kind of like interested in her. Um, but I always thought it was very strange that O'Neill had all these people, especially in the first season, that it was just somehow doesn't seem fitting for the character.
Yeah, I agree. Like I actually honestly forgot that even happened. Like that would be, yeah, I completely forgot about that until you mentioned that because like we've mentioned before, like me rewatching Stargate, when we first started this podcast, like I'd only watched it the one time through, and then this was just like my second time through. So like yeah, it would be interesting to actually rewatch those beginning episodes now, because it would probably feel so strange because I'd completely forgotten that they did that with this character. Like that is so out of character for
Right?
that. Yeah, it seems kind of strange. It was almost like they, like you said, it was like they're trying to make his character a certain type and then change their mind or something.
Exactly, and it just doesn't fit. I mean, they do it with Colonel Shepard in Atlantis, but they seem to kind of embed that more into his character, and his character kind of stays like that. I mean, at the same time, I'm not sure how much that fits either. Like, I almost think, like, to me, there were certain people that seemed like Shepard was leaning towards, and so I'm not also sure about that, but I think it's still more fitting than O'Neill because it just doesn't seem like O'Neill is that type. Like when you get to know his character.
Yeah. Well, Shepard like is always very, very flirty, I feel. Like, and so he just seems like that personality. Like I feel like there's always like that guy out there that's just like flirty with everyone. And that he so I feel like that suits him. I feel that suits Shepard, but with O'Neill, no. Like he does not seem like a flirty type or anything. Like it just yeah, that's kind of strange. And I had completely forgotten that he had those random flings.
Right, right.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, so far we haven't chosen the same things yet, so that's good.
So far.
Um okay, so my third one. So I thought it could have been interesting. So you know how Teal'c is introduced into the series and everything. He basically just bails on his
Mhm.
family, and he's, you know, you hear a little bit about his family um after the fact, but like you really don't see much of it. And then if I remember right, I can't remember what happens. Doesn't his wife get killed at some point?
Yes.
And then his son does get married, I think, to that girl, but then you don't really like hear anything really that I can remember with his family. So I had wrote that I thought it would be cool had had it happened differently, that his family moved with him to the base and they were more involved like on the base. So it's like his wife could have maybe been like learned to be like a medical assistant to Dr. Fraser or something, and then the son maybe went to regular school with Cassie or something. I don't know if their ages line up, I can't remember, but like it could have been cool to like have them involved, that when Teal'c was on like, you know, uh whatever, what's it called, like Stargate Command, is that what it's called?
Yeah, yeah.
When he's there on Earth, like he had his family, and there could be certain like I don't know, like cute moments with his family, or dramas or silly things that happen, you know, like when he was back, and that him and his family kind of stayed together. Like maybe initially he got separated from them, but then maybe he went back and brought them back, because it's just so sad. Like if you think about it, like how it's like you don't even know he has a family for the longest time, I think, and then like, oh yeah, he had a wife and he had a kid, and it's just kind of like he just like was okay with just like being away from them completely, you know? So it's just kind of like
Yeah.
seems kind of strange to me, like because his character to me seems a little bit more like his family was really important to him later on. So it's kind of like I feel like it maybe would have made sense, and it maybe would have made sense that they would have needed to be protected and stay with him so that they weren't in harm's way, and that they learned how to do like certain like things like so that they could be useful while they were there. So anyways, yeah.
No, I completely agree with you because like something that I mean, when you think about Teal'c as a character, one of the qualities of Teal'c is he has this like honor and this sort of this honor system within himself. And I mean, when I watched it the first time, it didn't really occur to me, but when I watched it through other times and later, I always was like, but wait a second, like would Teal'c really have, I mean, I guess he explains it because he's fighting for something, you know, this big thing for his family and for everyone. But it's like you almost think that in his situation, like given everything, he wouldn't actually have necessarily once the kind of the cat was out of the bag with his family, you think they would have tried to do something so that his family was out of the situation, or that they were more involved in some way, and that he didn't just like, you know, leave and go back to the SGC and then they're kind of forgotten until the next time they're relevant to the plot. So I think you're
Yeah.
totally right. I think it would make actually far more sense, or even if there was something where, you know, like that Teal'c did something to to ensure something for his family while he was away, or that they can't, like, that there was something a little bit more secure in place, because him as a character, he would have this sort of an honor system that he wouldn't want anything to happen to them. And
Yeah.
so, and in a sense, there's a point where he goes back and his wife is like married to someone else and living in a different house. And so it's clear, like at this point, he hasn't really been in contact or engaging with them. And retrospectively watching that, it doesn't seem in line with his character as much. So,
Yeah. 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 I mean, I know like when you're first introduced to his character, he's very like emotionally like robotic, right? Like he doesn't seem to express, like, because he's not human, but like, I mean, he doesn't express like himself well, and then gradually he starts to then make the jokes and laugh and things like that. So I guess maybe initially with his character they were figuring that like he just turns that part off, like in order to handle doing what he's doing. But I do feel like it seems like it doesn't fully make sense. It does seem like he would care enough for his family, regardless of if he stayed with his wife or not, that he would want them out of harm's way, like because he was considered, a traitor basically, and then they would
exactly.
definitely get targeted. So you would think like in that kind of situation, you would be like frantic to get them out and get them safe, regardless of, maybe his son wouldn't have liked to be taken off of their world, but like, um I could see that like being a thing where then they learn to stay on earth, and maybe that causes a bit of conflict at first, so that's like a bit of like a conflicted thing in the storyline, but then maybe they grow to,
Oh,
have friends and enjoy being there and things like that. So it could have been a whole thing. But yeah, so what's your third one?
I would. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying I wouldn't bring Beckett back, but I was always not so satisfied about bringing him back as a clone.
Yeah.
Like there's
Yeah.
something about it, because it was like there's Beckett, but it's not actually Beckett. And it's still always like, I know that the real Beckett never got to go on his fishing trip. And so even though Beckett was there, it still really bothers me because he still never got to go on his fishing trip. So I don't feel 100% satisfied with this return of Beckett. It's like, okay, he's there. It's really nice. We get to see Beckett again. But it's not like, I almost would have been more happy if it was like he ascended and then he came back, you know?
Yes, I fully agree, because I felt like that whole thing felt incredibly strange to me. Like
Okay.
I couldn't connect with it. I didn't feel like that was Beckett. I mean, it wasn't Beckett, it was a clone, right? But like it's supposed to feel like it's him, right? And
Yes.
um I feel like there was such, because I didn't know that was going to happen. Like I really didn't know. Like I had forgotten because I'd only seen Atlantis once, and I don't think you've seen Atlantis. Wait, no, you had seen Atlantis once, right? Like, um, so since both of us have only seen it once, I don't know if you had remembered that that
I,
happened or not.
I
Um, you did.
yes.
Oh, okay. But like I didn't, and which is no surprise. I never remember anything.
Me neither, but for some reason I remember that part. I don't know why.
Yeah. And so because I never remembered that that was going to happen, I was really kind of taken back when that happened in that episode. And I didn't know how to feel, because I feel like when he dies in that series, it's just kind of like such this emotional like impact. It like really, really upset me, even more so than the Dr. Fraser death upsetted me, in SG1. It's kind of like with Beckett, like I had gotten like I feel like there's so much with this storyline that you just like really grow to like care for that character, that it's just so sad, like everything that happens, and then like he kind of goes out as a hero, right? And and so to have such a huge like emotional impact, to then just have him appear, in some like little like dungeon somewhere as a clone, and then it's this
Yes.
whole weird thing, it just felt really strange to me. And maybe that's how it was supposed to feel, you know. I guess that's kind of how it felt to the characters too, that had to deal with seeing him again. So maybe it was supposed to feel that way, but it was hard for me
Yeah.
to fully connect with it, definitely.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and maybe like that's kind of maybe we're supposed to be uncomfortable about the situation and still
Mm-hmm.
um bothered. But it's like I have a it's kind of hard for me to tell like is this like a fan service thing because so many people were upset with Beckett? Is it a way to and I mean, I guess also there's part of the thing is I think that Beckett was the one most involved in all of the research of the Wraith gene. And so I think that's why actually him gone did create some issues in the story because I don't think Dr. Keller was it necessarily knew as much about his research as he did. And I think, yeah, she makes that quite clear. I think she's more in a different realm. Um, and he was kind of this was his thing. And so I think if they wanted to keep this like Michael storyline with all of these this aspect, there needed to be Beckett, or they wouldn't have a way of solving the issues. So I mean, I think in a sense, I mean, I guess I think that the reason he was killed off was more practical. I think it was because the actor had to go somewhere, but they could have, you knowing that it might not have been a permanent thing, like how with Michael Shanks, they knew it wasn't a permanent thing. They could have done something else. They could have sent him back to Earth. They could have made him ascend. There's many things they could have done with the character that
Yeah.
could make it irreversible. And I think in this case, they made it this I mean, and it was such a like a
Yeah.
sad. I mean, that episode is one of the best episodes. The one where he dies, and the most sad, the one that like kills you. It's so hard for me to watch. I will always be sad
Yeah.
he never gets to go on his stupid fishing trip. I
Yeah.
don't know why I'm
Yeah.
like too invested in that.
Yeah. I mean,
But
I
like,
think sorry, go ahead.
yeah, but no, yeah, that's what yeah.
Yeah, I think practically, like in real life, I think I had heard that he had been auditioning to be in the Star Trek movie or something like that.
Mhm.
And like he was aiming for like I think a main role in that, and he couldn't commit to the scheduling yet and didn't know like I don't I think what it is he didn't know like if he was getting a role in that or not. And he
Yep.
ended up just getting a really small role in that movie, I think. Like it wasn't really what I think he was aiming for. And so yeah, I mean it would have been nice if they just like had it that like I mean that I'm torn because that episode like you said was so good. Like that was a really good episode. So to not have that episode and just have it be something where like, maybe he has to visit family back on earth or something, or he
Yep.
has to do something that he's away for a little bit. um would it maybe be like as such of a they would have had to have a whole other storyline to have something else very impactful happen. But like so like it would be weird if that story never existed, like that episode. But at the same time, yeah, the clone stuff was just weird. It was just weird.
And I mean, consider how much ascension there is, and they're in Atlantis. It wouldn't be unheard of if he
Yeah.
ascended or had done so, like even if they came back and later retconned it by saying, "Oh yeah, he did this weird genetic thing to prepare and like it helped him go towards ascension." So what like then he came back and appeared. Like I mean,
Yeah.
I think it wouldn't have been so. But so far we're 3 for 3 that we have different ones. So what is your fourth one? Maybe this one's fine.
So I don't know if you'll have the same one for this one. Maybe not. Maybe you avoided it because maybe you wouldn't want this. I don't know. So I thought, and I know again there was practical reasons for this, but I thought it would have been cool if Jack stayed on SG1 and then him and Sam's relationship progressed. Um, I never, and I know like logically, like that could never happen when they were like still working together, right? Like it's supposed to be like that could never happen because of that. And I never and maybe I it's unique in me feeling this way, but I never liked when they had him take over as the general. Um right, that's the right term, general. Like
Oh
there's
yeah, yeah,
General
yeah.
Hammond and everything. How they had him like take over for a brief period of time with that. Like I never liked that. I found that kind of boring, and I felt like I always loved his like dynamics with the team. And when he was no longer with the team on missions, like I didn't like that. So if the actor himself was initially wanting to stay on the show, which, you know, that's the reason all of that happened, was because he wanted to be with his family in real life, spend more time with them. Like, I think it would have been really cool for that character to have stayed on SG1, and they just like have it that they break the rules, that him and Sam just have like a lot of feelings for each other and something happens. And like, I don't know if that would then just, when I've watched other shows where it's like they always have this like will they won't they kind of thing, then when they are finally together, sometimes it's actually quite boring. So maybe it would have gotten boring, you know. So I don't know if that's a good idea, but there's the part of me that like is very frustrated that like they make it seem like something's going to happen with them, they're finally admitting their feelings, and then poof, he's gone.
You know what they could do? I think the issue is that they're different ranks. So
Mhm.
if Carter was promoted, I think, to the same rank as him, and they were the same rank, then I think it would have worked. I think the issue is not,
Ah.
I'm not sure the issue is the military so much as just the ranking. I'm not sure. I don't know everything about the military. Like this is beyond
Yeah.
me. Somebody else that's watching this and has a better clue will say, no, absolutely not. There's no dating anyone. But I was under the impression that part of the issue was the separation of rank, the hierarchy.
Ah, okay. Okay. So yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, do you agree with that, or do you feel like that would have just made it boring?
No,
Like,
no, I completely agree because I think, I mean, I used to be, because I've been traumatized by certain shows where they let the characters get together and then it ends up terrible. I was, for a long time, I always thought you could never do that. But one show where they actually did that really well is Brooklyn Nine-Nine, because the two main characters, they get together and it's like somehow there are enough other aspects. And I think in this case, like, they would just be together, but there's so much other stuff going on. I mean, they have to deal with the aura and they have to deal with all these other things. And so I think like it would be there, but it wouldn't necessarily be, it was never so much of the main focus of the show, that I
mhm.
think it would just end up that rather than there being episodes that maybe have a little bit of the tension, that they're just together now. And so I think in that case, it wouldn't have actually caused a problem at all. I think it would have been, it would have been great, especially because it's been like what, 7, 8 years. And like, yeah, I would have really enjoyed it. I mean, they allude to it in some other later episodes after O'Neill is gone. They kind of allude to it, but to be able to see it, I think would have been nice.
Yeah. 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 Okay,
Yeah.
so what's your next one?
It's funny because my next one is also a relationship one, and I also think it's probably an unpopular one, but I would have McKay and Keller not get together.
Ah, yeah, oh, yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
not, I like both characters. And I especially like Dr. Keller, like when she's with Teal'c or exploring. I don't necessarily like, I think it's unnecessary to keep hooking Dr. Keller up. Like, I thought it was already weird to hook her up with Ronan because, I mean, other than making Ronan re-explore his toxic kind of like the past of him being hurt with, like, because
Yeah.
his previous partner was basically a like doctor or nurse or something. So it's kind of like reliving that. So to me, that would feel a little bit toxic. Um, so I don't think that was necessarily necessary. And I also like, I feel like it would have been perfectly satisfactory if McKay had this relationship with that person he was with and it didn't work out with her. And then he just ended up being McKay. And maybe his character had some growth from that. Maybe it didn't. Um, but I thought it was too oddly soon and too oddly convenient. Like for
Mm, yeah.
so I always found it a little bit dissatisfying. And it was always like one of those things where when they kind of alluded to it, it made me a little bit uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah. It does seem a little weird. It does seem weird. Like I liked him with that. I don't remember what her name was, the
Kate,
red-haired girl.
Kate,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really sweet, and it kind of like made sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, yeah, no, I agree with that one. I agree with that one for sure. Yeah.
And again, I like both characters. But it's just sometimes you don't always need to fix everybody up. And I think, that's when where you said like when sometimes when people get together, it's kind of like and I think with O'Neill and Carter, it would have been very satisfying. And, in this case, it was kind of like they didn't even allude, like it wasn't even like you spent 5 seasons building it up that you really wanted them to get together. It was just like suddenly they're a thing but why?
Yeah. 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 No, I agree. Like I hadn't even thought of that one. Cause like I'm trying to remember like because my memory is kind of faulty on that particular thing. Like wasn't there something, what episode was it where like there was like a thing where both it was Ronan and him both that liked Keller, right? And then like what episode was that where like I don't even fully remember watching it. I don't know. Maybe I haven't watched it. Is that still to come? Like, it's like a episode where like Ronan and McKay are kind of battling it out in a sense to try and win over Keller.
I thought that was already happened. Like I feel if something like it happened already, and I don't know, maybe I'm kind of I have to like because I've only recently started getting back into Atlantis, I'll have to check. Because I did take a short break to then watch the films, and now we've started going on with.
Yeah, that's why I can't remember either.
Mhm.
Because like I don't fully remember. Oh, I guess there was that episode where it showed them in the future and then like something happened with her, like where he was trying to help his like oh God. Yeah, there was that episode where what's his name? Why am I forgetting everyone's names? Joe Flanagan's character, Shepard.
Oh, Shepard.
Where Shepard was like having to like try and change things and how they ended up. And basically McKay was like a whatever you call it, like not real, like he was just what do you call that? Where
Hologram.
someone's hologram. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I couldn't think of the word hologram. Yeah. And then like he talked about like things that had happened with to cause everything to go to hell basically, and then like he had been with Keller, right? Like they were together and then she got really sick and then she died and blah blah
Mhm.
blah. So is that what you're talking about where they kind of had them as a thing, or was there something after that where they had anything else happen between them?
I'm pretty sure that it's after that, and then also before that, because I think even before that, like they're like dating or like already dating. It's just that not everybody knows, I don't think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
Like I
can't
have this,
remember.
I know before that, I feel like going, okay, yeah, that's right, they're dating. And then there's the future one, but I think what it is for a while the other characters don't know or something. I don't know. I would have to refresh my memory, and I'm probably wrong, but yeah, that's a thing I would like get
It's
rid of.
definitely insinuated, and there was definitely a few episodes where they flat out acted like something was going on between the two of them, but I can't remember fully because it's been a little while since I'd watched like um we had a good break in between the podcast and stuff. So like with the seasons, and so like I had taken a break from some of those episodes, so I'd have to look to see as well.
Mhm.
Okay, so let me see. Am I on my last one? Um Okay. So I wasn't sure about this one and I wrote it down anyways because I wasn't fully sure how I felt. Um, because I know it's such an emotional like thing too that everyone talks about. But I thought it would have been cool if Dr. Fraser never died. And but that Dr. Lamb, is that Dr. Lamb? Is that her name?
Dr. Lamb. Yeah.
That she still came in and was still in the show and was like an additional doctor on the show. Like, because I know, like, if you think about it, there's got to be more than just that one doctor. Like,
Yeah,
there's
no
multiple,
kidding.
right? And they're like the head of it, maybe, but there's certainly times when they can't just be the only one. So like I think it would make sense to have other doctors on there that were also a good portion of the storyline. And so like I think they still could have had like that whole episode, like, but just like have it that like maybe like you thought she was dead that whole time and then they had it by the end that she was somehow saved or something. I don't know. And then bring in the other doctor as well to kind of be part of the storyline, and have Dr. Lamb also be more of the storyline than they ended up actually having her. I think would
Yeah.
have been cool. So yeah.
Yeah, well, plus, I mean, I guess in that sense, you could also like get the relationship between the two doctors, and then there could be conflicts because maybe one thinks one thing and one thinks the other thing, and then and to solve the problem, it's this big it's another level of conflict. I think that could be kind of interesting, or a level of dynamic. I mean, that's another one that's so hard because Heroes is such a good episode. It's like one of the best episodes of Stargate, but it's like
Yeah.
so sad and like yeah, I love and hate it at the same time because yeah, I
Yeah.
wish we could have had Dr. Frasier after that. It's really unfortunate that after season 7 there's no more Dr. Frasier, especially because like I mean, I guess they kind of go over, okay, well, Cassie's with they have this throwaway line about Cassie, I think after Dr. Frasier's death. But
Yeah.
it kind of would have been cool to continue to somehow keep or retain Cassie in the story in some way too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know like with shows like that last so long, they have to have things that happen in it that really like shock the audience, or is something that happens within it that really keeps people engaged. And so certainly when you have things like that happen, it's hard for the viewers when they feel so invested in certain characters and grow to really love those characters. It's really sad for them, and some get mad, some get frustrated, and all of that. But at the same time, I can understand why they maybe need those things to happen, because then it continues to keep people invested maybe. But um I feel like it would have been nice to still keep her character around. But I was really torn of writing that one down, because then I was just like, okay, well, if that didn't happen, then what would have happened, because in reality everything isn't always okay. Like people do get hurt or things happen. And is it kind of silly to keep her around just because you want the character to be around? Like it would make sense like that suddenly someone's just gone. And so it is very it really messes with your head when that happens. That I
Yeah.
think that that's probably a good thing. So that's why I was a bit torn on to write that down, because I'm just like, well, her character I love, and I would have loved to have her stay, but then at the same time I can understand why that episode was there too. So
I mean, this one, it's so interesting, right? Because now that you mention it, I mean, in the context of just that episode as a standalone episode and the impact of it, it makes total sense that okay, yes, at this point we need something really pivotal to happen. But when you think about it in the context of things that happened before and after it, like I mean, and maybe they didn't know all the changes that would happen between season 7 and season 9. Of course, like nobody can anticipate it. But in season 5, you lost a main character for a full season. Then in season 7, you lost the character that was there for season 6 is gone. And then in season 8, the main character takes a different role, and there's another restructuring, and you lose, I think General Hammond isn't there in the same capacity anymore. I mean, he occasionally appears, but not in the show. And then by the time you get to season 10, you have almost an entire like 3 or 4 cast member change. So like it's very interesting because like you mentioned, yeah, you do need these things to happen. And I could totally see where they would feel like okay, at this point we need to have some kind of really impactful emotional moment. But like if you think about it retrospectively, if you knew what was going to happen in season 9 and 8, maybe they wouldn't have done that.
yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, with all the cast changes and things like that. Yeah, I would
Totally.
imagine that that's probably just something that they didn't initially know, right? They
Of
didn't
course. No,
initially
how
know
could
those
you?
things were going to happen. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But that's a very good point to bring up. Yeah. Yeah. So it could have been different, right?
Could have have been. I mean, like we could have had Frasier. Really, really interesting to think
Oh
about.
my gosh. So what's your final one? Have I hit on any that are the same as your final one, or is it good?
No, this is awesome. We all picked different ones. My final one is I would undo that the Tolan were wiped out.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they were kind of like, especially when I look at like in Atlantis, they kept the Jedi around forever. And I mean, I don't know, I haven't seen to the very end, so I don't know if the Jedi ever completely disappear because every time you think they're gone, they come back again anyways. And the Tolan weren't really like an enemy in that same sense, but there was such an interesting like aspect of how they related to like SG1, and there was also an interesting aspect how they related to the other advanced races that I think, especially as things became more intense and everything, they could have been a really, really strong asset to the show. And I
Yeah.
think I also don't know how I feel about their like ending that how much they stuck with their principles and then suddenly they're swayed, like because the one guy is gone or they managed to get rid of him, then they're willing to be swayed by some like second-rate Goa'uld about something like that. Always seemed very weird to me, but
Yeah, that is very true. I always felt like the Tolan just seemed like something that would stick around in the storyline. And so I was always just surprised when that happened. Like I just always
exactly.
kind of like something about um I don't know why I thought that, but something about that world and the characters from that world just seemed to be stronger than some of the other times that they've met like other people, people or aliens or whatever you'd call them on other planets. Something about that just seemed like it would have stuck around more, and so it just kind of
Yeah,
seemed like an unnecessary like cut to all that could have been there. I just felt like there definitely was more in the storyline that could have been like connected those two. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I think what our list goes to show is there's always so many options, right? It's like if you think, I mean, also like with all of the seasons, there's so much like storyline to really think about that you could probably think about almost anything with this show, like, oh, what if this happened but this didn't happen, or there's so much more. So like I can imagine other people listening to us or whatever maybe have a whole other list of five points that they would
oh yeah.
that they would bring
and
up of what they would want to change and stuff.
And I'm sure like some of the stuff, if it didn't change, like it maybe would have made the show really, truly terrible. Like maybe there's something really terrible. Like maybe the Tolan staying around like would have had this weird storyline and then it would have made the show really bad. So it's like, I mean, of course, like some things like they happen and then it's good because it feeds to this into the show and that into the show. And so I mean, it's very interesting. Like I would be I could probably make an even longer list, but it's also interesting because it makes you think about how things change in the show and then how some ways, like I feel like some things, like even if you didn't like the thing, the way it was done really well. But
Yeah.
then there's things where I don't like the thing, but I also don't necessarily like how it was done. Like I think you bringing up Weir, like I don't think her ending was necessarily. Whereas I would say, okay, at least Frasier dying, it was such an emotionally impacting thing, and the episode itself was so well done, and the whole context of how she was killed and everything, it was so well done that even though like I hate that she's not there anymore, I can't argue with the way they did it. But like with Weir, there's some little bit
Yeah.
of unsatisfaction. Like you mentioned, I think there's something a little bit unsatisfactory about the end, to me at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, totally. Totally. So yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to hear other people's things that what do you call it? Retcon. I
Yeah,
always forget the term.
what would you retcon or uncanon? And I mean, I think it's fun also the like little things that you would uncanon that maybe have no relevance to the plot. Like, I mean, it has no relevance to the plot line that Colonel O'Neill was hooking up with a few people in the first season. It's not relevant at all, but it's still kind of like,
Yeah.
little, those little things that maybe kind of, especially, I imagine in the beginning as the characters are kind of, you know, getting their stride and we know that they did remove like a certain line from the pilot, that Carter said. So they did actually truly retcon something.
That's funny.
They uncanned it, and the best part is that they bring that line back in Mobius in the ending of season 8, and have Carter actually say it and then remark about how stupid that line is. I love it.
I love it. I love how like they're able to just like make fun of themselves. It's great.
Exactly. No, for sure, for sure. And I mean, of course, like we say all these things, but like, you know, we love I love the writing of the show. Like I think everything, it's a brilliant. And of course, like you can't be happy if you're happy with everything in a show, then it probably isn't a very good show. Like
Yeah.
if there aren't things
Yeah.
that bother you or make you upset or like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.